Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much to the technical team who've made this presentation possible. 5 minutes or 10 minutes ago, I didn't think it would be. Thank you for the introduction, Sebastian. My name is Peter Vaughan. I'm an architect who's collaborated with Asif for the last decade. Asif Khan's studio is a London-based architecture and design practice. We design buildings, landscapes, exhibitions, and installations that are strongly led by in-house and collaborative research and development. The studio combines research and practice and teaching internationally, reconsidering the relationship between scale, materials, architecture, and ourselves. Hopefully this will work. Yeah. We explore how material and social innovations can fundamentally alter the way people experience and shape their environment. Central to the studio's practice is research through testing and making. Materials, color, light, movement, and sound are used to question predefined ideas of how buildings are made and environments are experienced. The designs over the last 10 years I have been working with Asif have sought to evoke feelings of surprise and wonder, to stimulate our senses, the process of thinking through doing has led to projects that explore the story of the universe through the idea of energy, expressed through a medium of light, sound, and movement. Within an immersive, computer-generated environment. This has led on to projects where we have helped our local community to maximize their ambitions within a limited budget and encourage children, parents, and staff to engage in the briefing process so that the outcome is something that responds to the need of the community and helps to re-establish a sense of place. Recently, we have imagined how to turn a two-dimensional geometrical screen, traditionally used for shading and environmental control, into a structure that can span 21 meters, with beams that consist of 10 millimeter thick woven carbon fiber filaments that weigh a little more than me. The studio's belief that through experimentation and imagination, new materials, new fabrication techniques will lead to fresh thinking and new ideas. As a studio, we are applying this approach to the cultural projects we are currently working on. We encourage and are encouraged by our clients to investigate ideas that are transformative. Building is a conduit where sky meets ground. Tengri and Umay. The central idea for the project should help support the Institute's program so that it embodies and reflects the aspirations of those who commission it and future generations who will use it. Space for ideas to help forge a new identity. Our new cultural buildings that play on historic vernacular use motifs unique to a place to create a subtle control of atmosphere that helps to root the building in a place, the people, the culture, and the objects and ideas that an institute values. For this talk, I will focus on 3 projects over 3 scales. 1 completed, the scale of an object, 1 an unbuilt competition, a new building, and 1 currently under construction, the city and museum. The projects are selected to stimulate debate about the role of the museum as an essential part of the city, to facilitate the community and visitors to understand its people and history. The first project I would like to speak about is a recent exhibition design we have completed for the Neue Sammlung in Munich. We were approached by the director, Dr. Angelika Nollet, to imagine ways of displaying a recent gift of 500 African ceramics bequeathed to the museum by Franz, Duke of Bavaria. Duke Franz has been collecting these design objects for over 60 years from 20 countries in Africa. We understand that this is a significant moment in modern history where the provenance of an object in the context of colonial or post-colonial, we wanted to take part in the conversation, even though it's a small project, to openly discuss the history of a collection like this, how objects have been decontextualized over time and from place. And as designers, we wanted to show these objects as design objects. Duke Franz gave the collection to a design museum, not an ethnographic museum. The museum titled the exhibition A Different Perspective. For the exhibition, the curatorial team of Dr. Nollet, Dr. Barbara Thompson, Dr. Caroline Fuchs, and Dr. Joseph Strasser selected 250 objects to exhibit based on 4 themes: form, technique and materiality, gender and body, ceramics and markets, and contemporary. The exhibition is split over 2 spaces. The first, the rotunda, a naturally lit gallery on the 3rd floor of the museum. The second, an artificially lit gallery on the ground floor. Dr. Barbara Thompson has been working with Duke Franz for over 20 years. Through her guidance, we started to imagine how the collection could be exhibited. Through a process of discussion and debate, we agreed that we would create 2 distinct experiences. In the rotunda, exhibiting the ceramics as objects in use, frozen movement, how they were grasped, lifted, carried, the heft and weight, and how the objects were stored, so body in use. In the second space, the ground floor gallery, we wanted to examine the relationship between material and environment, river and clay. Developing the idea of mounting a selection of the ceramics in positions of use to reinforce that these objects were functional, refined, designed objects, designed for a specific task. Asif remembered a collection of Makonde artwork in his home in South London. Asif's mother, Layla, is from Tanzania. We proposed that the wooden mounts sculpted by a Tanzanian artist could be utilized to hold the selected pieces in positions of use. We researched leading Makonde artists and found a sister and brother, Mawandele and Nataluma, who are reinterpreting the art form. We asked them to imagine how they might approach this project. Through direction from Dr. Thompson, 10 pieces were selected that best illustrated different uses: storage, drinking, etc. Nataluma took careful measurements of each piece to produce a template on how each mount would be created. The timber he selected, Nataluma called it ironwood, was so hard that he had to use an angle grinder to carve the pieces into an exact fit. It was an extremely challenging process for the artist, curators, and technicians to accomplish. The result, we think, is breathtaking. The remaining objects on this floor are arranged in an abstract form of storage to illustrate how the objects are cured and stacked prior to use or sale, and how we first encountered them in the Duke's store above his house. The exhibition layout worked with the existing building structure to allow the objects to be experienced from all angles, to truly appreciate the level of craft, texture, color, and decoration. The second space, we worked with a South African art photographer and videographer. Is that moving? Oh, it is moving. Andy McConney, to produce a backdrop to be projected on the walls of the gallery. The sound of the wind in the trees, the rain falling and the movements of the river formed a backdrop to the display. The serpentine display surface allowed the objects to be viewed as a unified collection when first entering the space, but allows visitors to move amongst the ceramics and examine them in a more intimate way at their own pace. Through a subtle interplay of audio, movement, form and material, alongside a great collaboration with curators, technicians, artists, the exhibition seeks to establish, in Dr. Nollet's words, a different view of things and precisely not a traditional way of viewing something different. Difference and diversity as the maximum and ideal of a museum. That is what we consider our greatest task. The exhibition is still running until the 19th of April. The second project I will show is an unbuilt competition for the Guggenheim-Museum in Helsinki. Helsinki is, in its modern form, still a city defined by the Engel master plan. Overlapping grids initially defined the South Harbour as a nexus for the city for trade, commerce, until modern shipping technology meant the hustle and bustle of a trading port moved to another area of the city. The site, as Dr. Markus Latamäki, art and architectural historian and Helsinkian, puts it, is now in a permanent, temporary condition. We work closely with Markus to understand the city and the site. He wrote an essay for us for our competition submission, titled Inventing the Place, Connecting the City. He writes, a gesture strong enough to change and reinvent the site around it, yet quiet and subtle enough in its way to review and create connections with the city, its grids, its streets, and above all, its citizens is needed. As you walk, there are areas of the city that you notice in Helsinki that are strongly identifiable by their texture. It helps to demarcate one public space from another and inform and dictate their pace and function. Our proposal in return brought one new texture, a delicately undulating glass membrane. There is a tremendous history and sensitivity for glass craft in Finland. Tapio Verkala, Kay Frank, and we worked with Itala to make our models and Glaston, the largest Finnish glass technology company, to explore manufacturing. Helsinki city blocks in the 1800s were named after wild animals. Through the use of texture within the glass, the proposed block will have the tactile familiarity of a pet's fur. We called the project Quiet Animal. Helsinki has a rich tradition of illuminated signage, reaching a peak in the 50s. Using this language, we proposed the building to have two signs, one to address the city, reading Museum, and one towards the sea, reading Guggenheim. Local and international. A subtle provocation about architecture as an agent for change. A complex proposition for a city and a country that is wrestling with the embrace of globalization. Using this language, we proposed the building to have The glass facade sits on a raised plinth, hovering over the water, and reflects the sky and captures the play of seasons. In the winter, the building becomes winter. When the sun sets, the building becomes a sunset. As you ascend the central staircase and look out Helsinki, your view of the city is transformed. The final project I'd like to speak about is the new Museum of London. It sits at the heart of the city, of the modern city, surrounded by a rich array of cultural, technological, and financial institutions. The museum can absorb the ideas and propositions from these institutions, encouraging thought about the city as it was, as it is and how it could be. It is not enough just to be there. The architecture and the programming of the spaces needs to be fit for this purpose. Museums today can provide the same function as early universities. Rather than repositories of artifacts, they provide an educational platform for people to understand and be inspired by the city they live in. The New Museum of London sits at the western end of an ambitious cultural master plan. 4 cultural institutes, the Museum of London, the Metropolitan Meat Market, Barbican, and the London Centre of Music will be woven together along a pedestrian mile. For this talk, we will focus on the westernmost building of this burgeoning cultural district, as it offers a unique proposition for a museum, both as a building and how it is programmed. The 19th century General Market building. The General Market is characterized by a large central square wrapped by an outer crust of houses which face out onto the street. Taking the central square first, this is an incredible space that operated as a market for 100 years. With its amazing dome structure and light interior, this will be a place for London to meet, debate, and learn. The brief for this space was complex. By contrast, the outer crust is a sequence of more intimate, house-like spaces. We have collaboratively developed the brief with the client for these spaces to include areas that will form part of the museum, giving it the opportunity to speak to the street and offer glimpses into the exciting content inside, and areas that can be tenanted by partner institutes, acting as standalone units. Our response to this brief is led by 2 concepts. Firstly, celebrate the historic fabric by minimizing proposed interventions, harnessing the existing layout and character of the building. In essence, recognizing and celebrating that the building is now the largest artifact in the museum's collection. And secondly, establish an architectural arena in which the museum, the public, and partner institutes can collaborate. This requires the building to function as a cohesive urban block, both inward-facing and outward-looking. This is how Horace Jones designed the General Market to originally operate: a 3-story perimeter crust of shop fronts and offices, cradling a bustling square for market stall trading. So how do you transform a market to become a museum? This is an image of our competition-winning proposal back in 2016. A spiral staircase connects the central square to the permanent exhibition galleries below. It offered the visitor an enticing journey down into the subterranean vaults. But as we developed the brief for the central square with the museum, we came to realize that it was significantly carving away at our usable floor area. So we re-questioned what kind of vertical circulation would be best for the brief in the space and opted to push the stair to the side to free up the central square plan, which you can get a sense from this photo taken just a few days ago. Moving the stair enables and encourages the central square to accommodate all manner of exhibits, talks, performances, and events, and means the space can also house collected artifacts of substantial scale. We are eagerly anticipating what the museum might unveil. The fringes of the central square lie the historic spine wall, which separates the central square from the crusts of houses. It is an artifact that speaks of the layered history of the building, something to be preserved and exhibited as part of the museum's collection. We are treating it with the utmost care by adopting a selected approach of retention and surgical intervention. And where possible, making bold moves by enlarging existing openings, like this view into the Paleo-Botanical Restaurant on access with the main entrance. So through the retention of the significant portion of the building fabric, the layered character and history of the central square remains an ever-present backdrop in the new museum. The terraced of modestly scaled houses beyond the spine wall offer an altogether different spatial character to the central square, Some of these houses are to be occupied by the more domestically scaled functions of the museum. Gallery showcases that spill out from the central square, the main shop, learning show space, family restaurant, cafe bar, each with their own distinct character taken from the histories of each of these units. However, as the area acquired for the brief was smaller than the offered by the existing building, some of the houses programmatically turned out not to have a home. It was this surplus of space that provoked the brief development to also accommodate partner institutes, shown here in green. The idea of a housing partner institute strongly resonated with the museum's vision. Apologies for the slide. And the development of this hybrid commercial cultural strategy was a product of a close collaboration with the client and client stakeholders. By mixing and rotating the uses in the outer crust, the museum's curators are in a unique position to question what a museum can be. Through inviting thinkers, makers, researchers, retailers mixed with access to the collection can help to define the identity of a museum and inform how it speaks to the diverse demographic of London, bringing diversity and dynamism to a new museum, expressed through their own tenant-designed shop fronts, where diversity is to be encouraged. Within this assemblage of tenant houses, research labs, startups, micro-cinemas, which can change over time to reflect the ebb and flow of a major global city, we think it's important that the urban block reads coherently as a single institution, the Museum of London. We've approached this challenge in two ways. Firstly, by giving the museum shop fronts a consistent identity legible across all four facades. The idea of a museum having a shop front to the street is very unusual. So we sought out the unusual and set about to find a way in which to draw the eye of the passerby without obscuring the view into the museum and the spaces beyond. This is ongoing research and development where we are playing and prototyping with the optical qualities of glass to try and redefine and refine how you might look at and through a contemporary museum shopfront. Combining very large glass sizes with prismatic treatments and illuminated reveals. Here we see a view into the museum cafe. The second way in which we are offering the museum a voice in which to speak to the city is more direct. A framework wraps the building upon which large-scale architectural lettering can be programmed to announce exhibitions and events, and as a canvas for artists, locals and visitors to share their story about the city. Over the past few years, there have been a major shift in the expectations and behaviour of audiences in museums. Visitors take over spaces and use them as an arena for their own experiences, both physically and digitally. As a result, museums need to be in constant evolution, offering an environment that can accommodate the ever-changing nature of contemporary public life. It is this need that underpins the design approach for the new Museum of London. Thank you.